Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone just a couple of minutes to log on and then we'll get started. So please hang tight as everybody gets in the webinar and then we'll begin. Good evening and welcome. We're so glad you took the time today to spend an hour with us to learn more about the status of collegiate athletics here at the University of Findlay, and hopefully we can answer as many questions as possible in this hour. So we'd like to start with our president of the University of Findlay, Dr. Katherine, with an update from her perspective on athletics right now.
Thank you, Brandi, and good evening, Oilers and parents. We are delighted to have this opportunity to talk with you and to address your questions. Most of your questions will be specifically about athletics, and Brandi will be the expert on that topic. But from my point of view, I want you to understand that the senior leadership of the university and I are in full support of you student athletes. We want the best experience possible for you under difficult circumstances, and we're fighting very hard to make that possible while we keep you safe. I serve currently as the chair of the President's Council of GMAC, and I've had a number of meetings with all the presidents over the last several weeks, and all of us are in unison in supporting a safe start to GMAC athletics. We want to see you play, and we want to see you stay safe and be able to complete your academic program as well as grow and enjoy your athletic experience. So together, with your help, with your coaches' great leadership, and our commitment to you, we'll get that done. Thank you.
So a little bit about the format, how we're going to spend our hour. I'd like to go through some points and give you perspective on a timeline and how we got to where we are today, some of the decision-making process and guiding principles in athletics that we'll use to navigate through this fall and the year to come. And then we will open it up for question and answer. You will be able to type those questions in the question and answer section on the webinar, and then we'll be able to answer as many questions as we can. If there are questions we don't get to at the end, we'll make sure to follow up any pertinent questions that we can. And this webinar is being recorded and will be placed with a link that we'll get out to all of our student athletes for those that weren't able to join us, or if there's a question that you want to rewatch and learn more about. So with all of that being said, we're going to share the screen here so you have some visuals to talk about how we got to where we are today. Okay, so a little bit of a timeline of how we come here today on August 13th. This all started in March. And so briefly to talk about the timeline of March is when all spring athletic events were halted. That was a huge turning point in collegiate athletics, not just here, but across the country. We got to May and Division II Management Council and President's Council supported the recommendation to reduce athletic competition dates for all of our sports, not just fall sports, but all of the sports through the 2021 academic year. That is a 1-year adjustment that does reduce sports competitive dates allowable from anywhere from 10 to 33% to allow for flexibility for us to get through this unprecedented year. We'll throw in Oilers out there. You did win the President's Cup again last year, so congratulations. That was a key good news that we've had through all of this frustration and turmoil that we've been in over the last almost year. Then July 28th, big gap there. A lot was happening and we were making a lot of plans and decisions and preparations to provide you the best experience. July 28th, the Great Midwest Athletic Conference delayed the start of our fall competitive start dates. So we needed more time and we wanted to make sure we were not just evaluating the availability of competition and what we were doing, we're also monitoring the health conditions of not just our immediate area, but all of that in the region and our conference. So we delayed the competitive start dates. Had a plan in place, and then August 5th, the NCAA set out a new and more stringent set of mandates that really changed our course of action. August 6th, the NCAA Division II canceled fall championships. I will tell you that in the winter when we had championships canceled in the middle, and then in the spring when championships were canceled, none of us thought we would be sitting here in August canceling fall championships. But the pandemic has caused and has lingered on longer to provide us these obstacles that are not going to allow for fall championships. So that happened on August 6th. On Monday, August 10th, the Great Midwest Athletic Conference, President's Council, under recommendations from the athletic administrators and a lot of conversation, made the very hard decision to postpone all fall contact sports to the spring of 2021. We then received some more clarification and updates from the NCAA that provide us what we hope to be a pathway for some really beneficial and meaningful experiences for our student athletes this fall, regardless of the availability to do some of our competitions. And we are now waiting for our next update. August 21st, the NCAA will provide guidance on eligibility implications from the Board of Governors and what that will look like specifically for Division II. And then again on October 27th, the Board of Governors will meet to evaluate those mandates and guidelines and give us guidance and policies to live under for the winter and beyond. So a lot has changed, and a lot has changed just recently. And I share in, and I know you're frustrated with that. I know you're frustrated and maybe a little anxious with the ever-changing situation. And we are doing our best to keep you as informed as we can. But know that we're here and we are going to make a plan. We have a good plan in place to keep you safe, to help mitigate the risk. We can't eliminate risk in this situation, but we're going to do the best we can to provide you not only the safest experience, but the best experience we can for the fall and beyond. So that's how we got here. Now, what does it look like in the next upcoming weeks? You have lots of questions. We have freshmen moving in right now, and our transfers are arriving today, and our returning student athletes are going to be coming back starting tomorrow. So there's a lot happening quickly. Monday, 17th will be our first day of class. All of you should be ready to go, have your class schedule and be ready to focus on academics. We will begin returning student athlete physicals and balance testing the 18th through the 20th. You received all of that information via email from me, forms to complete, and also the spreadsheet to sign up for that time. It is important as we move through this process. We've lost a little bit of our flexibility to just show up. So we need you to make sure you're signing up for your returning physicals or balance testing for everyone, as we do have some new requirements for concussion protocol. So everybody does need to do balance testing this year. You will have the opportunity to meet with your team. Team meetings will be occurring in that first week of class. They may be virtual, they may be outside. Anything that is happening in person you'll be masking and social distancing, and that's okay. And I think that we can be creative on how we meet. I know we have teams that are planning on meeting at Armstrong and sitting in the bleachers or at Kramer Field, lots of different places so we can meet in person and virtually. And you will see a lot of that hybrid approach of in-person and virtual. We are hopeful to have the weight room facilities open August 24th, so your second week of class, for voluntary workouts. Any of our facilities right now will be open for you to use as a general student, but we're hoping to have the weight room facilities open on the 24th. On August 28th will be our first allowable team activity and countable athletically related activity. And that will be different based on your sport, what segment you'll be in, whether it's non-championship or out of season, and what that might look like. And then we are looking at and hopeful that we will be able to have competition in men's and women's cross country, men's and women's golf, and men's and women's tennis. And the 28th will be the day that they will be allowed to start permissible competitive activity. The couple of things that are important about that that I want to say is tentative is because there are testing mandates that we have to have in place and protocols that we need to follow. So that date may be adjusted. And we are also may have to adjust dependent on competitive opportunities and what exists. So all of this is a best laid plan, but I ask for your grace and your flexibility that it may, we may see some changes as we move forward. So I've mentioned a plan a couple of times, and what does that look like? There's a very detailed plan, and I'm going to touch on some key points here, but really our guiding principles that we use to make a plan of return to safe athletic activity is that the safety of not just you as our student athletes, but our coaches and staff, and all of those you engage with, your health and safety was our utmost priority. And so everything we are doing has that as the reason. And the question of there's an if question, it all comes back to the health and safety of our student athletes and staff. So something that is very important, as you have read in the Start Safe, Stay Safe plan for the university, if you haven't, please take time to read that. Make sure you know what's expected of you as not only a student athlete, but as a student on the campus. That masking is very important and masking is required inside and outside, specifically when social distancing can't be met. So we'll have a zero tolerance policy for that. We need you to be leaders. We need you to not only follow the procedures, but to help guide students on campus. That is in your nature to be leaders. And so we really need you to do that. And we will have a zero tolerance policy for masking or not adhering to any of the other guidelines and parameters we have in place. So some of the basic principles that we're going to follow, and some of these are you're getting used to hearing. Physical distancing, anytime we can physical distance and not congregate before activities, that's what we're going to try to do. Universal masking, you will not see people very often without a mask on. We are not requiring masks at this point for actual athletic activity, but there's requirements for masking on the sidelines and different things that we are doing. And for each team, I promise you when you get back and we're having team meetings, we will dive into the specific things for your sport. But masking is required. And I do ask again that you are leaders in that and that we are being cognizant of masking. Health checks, you will do a daily health check. You should have already started receiving emails and alerts on your Oiler mobile app about health checks. And we will use those. That health check, when you mark student athlete, the reason that's pulled out is you should be getting an email back. That email back will be your ticket into any athletic facility. So you will need to show that you have completed a health check and that there were no red flags before you can enter an athletic facility or compete or participate in any athletic events. So use that health check. Your coaches are using it. Our staff is using it daily. Across campus, it's being used. So we need you to do that daily. We will have specific health checks for competition that will be a little bit more face-to-face in person, where our medical staff will be taking your temperature and we'll be more involved. But on a daily basis, we do need you to use the Oiler mobile app and the health check option there. If you've got questions about that, I could figure it out technology-wise. You should be fine. It's very quick and easy and will allow us to keep you safe. Some of these next items, I think you're doing anyway and have been, but hand hygiene, making sure we're using tissues or your elbow when you're coughing, not touching your face. All of those things that we should do anyway for good hygiene are really important right now. Disinfecting, you are going to see more disinfectant product and procedures than you've probably ever seen in your life. Some of you may need to take these procedures back to your residence halls or your house just to help with general hygiene. But you're going to see disinfecting, and it's going to become part of our daily life when we're using our equipment. You're going to see your coaches far more engaged in disinfecting. And so that's important. And so we can help make sure we're keeping everything as clean and safe as possible. Something that is probably the hardest for us in athletics to do, if you're not feeling well, we need you to stay home. And that's hard. You don't want to let your team down. You don't want to let your coach down. But right now, more than ever, if you are not feeling well, you need to be in contact with your athletic trainer, Castellano Health Center, and make sure that we're doing all we can to keep you safe and also keep everyone in the department safe. So if you're feeling sick, staying home is really important. You will see signs on the buildings for entering and exiting facilities to limit crossing. So there's entrance signs and exit signs, and that's important. And we are looking at even some additional permanent changes to our weight room facility to allow for an entrance and an exit. So you're, going to see more and more changes with that. And then, as I said before, our availability to just show up is becoming harder and harder because we do need to monitor who's in our spaces and our facilities and also keep track of capacity and all that we're doing. So we're going to need to schedule better, and we're going to need to see what hours might be open for general use when you're coming in, but we just need to make sure we know where you are when using athletic facilities, just to help if we would have an issue with contact tracing and all that we're doing. So we'll have a better system to schedule so you know when things are available and when you can use the spaces. Some updates on travel and hotel stays, and this may be a little far off for many of our sports, but we have implemented a 500-mile radius for travel for the whole academic year. 500 miles is a long way, and we can go lots of places within that. That may change. I will be very honest with you in that as the pandemic continues to change and health conditions change, that radius might get smaller. It might get bigger, doubtful. It could happen. But we have put that in place to limit travel. And we may have conditions where states where there's quarantine requirements that travel can't happen. And so we'll adjust based on that. Masking in vehicles, that is all laid out very clearly in the Start Safe, Stay Safe plan. So please look at that. But we will ask for masks and require masks to be worn in vehicles and communal vehicles. That will allow us to be at a fuller capacity and allow us to get you where you need to go. We're also going to look at sharing when we have hotel stays. You will see limited hotel stays this year. We've adjusted schedules, and schedules continue to adjust to limit that. But you may be staying in your hotel with your roommate that's from campus. You're already going to be close. You've built that family type atmosphere. And so we'll work to make those adjustments this year that are a little bit different than what we normally do. So all of this is in place, and we've looked at keeping you safe, mitigating risk, and use these guiding principles. There's far more behind these documents that we will get in detail with you here on your team meetings. But the reason I wanted to highlight these things is for you to know we have a plan in place. We know that there are still lots of questions, and we're trying to get some more clarification on the recent updates. But we want you to be here and to know that, as President Fell stated, we are working very hard to provide you the best and most complete student-athlete experience, knowing it's going to be different this year, but knowing that it's going to be good. And that's our goal. It is our mission to provide you with that championship experience every day. And that mission hasn't changed. The way it may look might have changed, but our mission hasn't changed, and we are committed to providing you that experience. So with all of that being said, I will stop talking and start listening. So if you have questions that you can type into the question and answer section, we have a great trustee, Liz will be reading those, and we'll be able to answer as many questions as we can.
Okay, our first question involves a spring sport athlete for lacrosse. What type, if any, practicing will be allowed this fall and winter?
So we are working with the recent changes that changed last week on what that looks like. We are hopeful to be able to provide as close to a normal practice as possible. And if we can't get there, we'll be as close as we can. So it is our goal to have complete practices. It's going to take a little while to get there. We're going to start slow. We're going to kind of ease into practices, ease into close contact. And then we'll be able to, today, our goal is to be able to provide full practices either in the off season, so that 8-hour-a-week window, or non-championship segment for the 20-hour-a-week window, to provide full experience as close to that as we can. Not a great answer. I know you want to know specifically if you're going to be able to have full contact practices. That's our goal, but I can't say today for sure when we'll get there. I think we'll get there, but I don't know if it'll be delayed depending on our state and local regulations.
Thank you, Brandi. Are there any NCAA, GMAC, or school COVID testing requirements?
Yes, so we do have some testing requirements. Currently, and something that has changed maybe 3 times over the last week for testing requirements, that we are required to do a specific type of test. So we are required to do a PCR test for any competing student athletes. So right now, looking at the fall, the only student athletes we anticipate testing that are asymptomatic would be men's and women's cross country, men's and women's golf, and men's and women's tennis. And we are working to locate those tests. Testing shortages is the biggest problem and one of the biggest hurdles that athletic departments across the country are having. So we are trying to locate those tests. We are working with, we'll have to work through a private lab to get those tests, but we will only be testing asymptomatic student athletes on competing teams, and then we'll be following state and local guidance and university policy that we will be testing symptomatic student athletes if needed, but only competing teams at this point have the requirements to be tested.
This next one, Brandi, is a conditioning question, and it's 2 parts. The first part is, will there be group lifting sessions? And the second part, if so, will they be required to wear masks?
So we are working through the logistics of the weight room. If you were able to come to a summer workout, we had about 100 student athletes who were on campus in the summer for voluntary workouts, and we were able to provide the weight room space for that. So things are spread out a little bit more. We are using half capacity in the weight room. So for you guys that are used to a packed weight room, you will love it because you're going to have a whole lot more space. But we will be doing, our goal is to start that the second week of class for weight room activity, voluntary workouts. And at this point, we will be masking going in and out of the weight room, but not specifically when you are doing the activity, but in and out. So that again could be adjusted or changed depending on local and state mandates, but right now we will not be requiring masks during athletic activity.
If sports such as football are moved to spring, how will you ensure that the spring sports have fair and equal access to practicing, playing fields, buses, etc.?
So it is going to be a logistical puzzle for us to be able to compete 22 sports all at the same time. And so we've acknowledged that, and we are looking at ways to make sure that no group is disserviced in that process. We are looking at a little bit more flexibility in the timing of practices, competitions, the dates that those are going to happen is all being looked at and adjusted. With some of our classes and some of you being in hybrid classes, that does provide us a little bit more flexibility and timing with some of the online options. But we will do our very best and make sure that no one group is disserviced or limited in access and space. But everybody's going to have to compromise. It will look different because everybody's going to be using the same space. And in January and February, let's be honest, the weather's probably not going to be great. So we're all going to be trying to use indoor space. But I can say with confidence that not one group will be affected more than any other.
Thank you. If temperature is part of the health check, what if a student athlete does not have access to a thermometer?
So we do have thermometers available for use that either your coaches would have. We will have them in specific places in each of our athletic buildings so that you can use one. I would recommend you getting a thermometer just to have in this time. If there are any required for travel temperature checks, we will obviously do those. But I do recommend you getting one if you can. If not, we will have them available within the athletic facilities that you can come by daily to use.
For fall sports, will the GMAC begin working on schedules for those sports now? Or will they wait to see what is decided as of the October reevaluation?
We are already working on those schedules. The scheduling committee for the GMAC has been working hard. God love them. I think they're on schedule version 15 maybe for our fall sports. But we're already getting those in place. We want to be able to provide you the best picture of what that's going to look like from a time perspective. So when you're starting, knowing that those dates have moved, are you starting in January, are you starting in February, are you starting in March? So we're looking at that. We're trying to put it in the calendar in a way that limits some of those other concerns about somebody not having access. So we will adjust that and have those dates put out to you just as soon as we can, but it is something we're working on now.
This is a student that lives out of the country, and for right now, her home country, the embassy is closed for a visa business due to pandemic restrictions. So she's not sure how long it's going to take to get her US visa and her schedule. She's trying, but there's a chance she might not make it till the end of August. She's wondering if she has late arrival options or if she should consider a spring start as an alternative.
I guess a follow-up question we'd want to know is she registered for class and ready to go from that perspective?
So if she can type that, we will get this answered then for her.
Because if you're registered and ready to come to class, we can make all of the accommodations for you to be enrolled at home for right now. And then when you can get here, if any of those classes are face-to-face or hybrid, then you can kind of smoothly come back into those classes. But that would be the most important thing, is if we can make sure you're registered. We can definitely, as an institution, provide you those classes electronically for you to keep up. So if you're not registered, make sure you get that done. And if we can make that happen, then we can make all the accommodations to make sure you're not behind.
And one of our participants, a UF employee that's listening, says UF is accepting international students on campus until August 28th. So we can follow up with her and check on that.
Yes.
How often will competing athletes be COVID tested? Will they be tested before each competition?
It is dependent on the contact level as defined by the NCAA, based on the 3 levels that they have outlined. So we have a high contact level, a medium, and a low. And the testing requirements for each of those is very different. Currently, as it stands, our contact sports that have all been delayed have a testing requirement of before season, so upon arrival, when competing, and then 72 hours before every competition, and then also surveillance testing weekly. And so for high contact sports, there's a lot of testing that is required. For our medium and low contact sports, we are in a situation where we will test upon arrival, and then we'll monitor with masking and social distancing, and then be able to just test symptomatic student athletes as we move forward. So very different based on the level of contact. But for our low and medium contact sports that will be participating this fall in competition, we'll be testing upon arrival, if tests are available, and then moving forward with surveillance testing as needed. But for high contact sports, there is testing requirements 72 hours before competition, and then also weekly surveillance testing for those high contact sports.
Right now, Brandi, that is all the questions that we've had that have come in.
Awesome.
Oh, we just got another one. Is there any chance that the sports schedule could conflict with the date of graduation?
This would not be new or specific to this year, that our sports competition schedules sometimes conflict with graduation. Specifically, traditional years is our spring sports that have conflicts with graduation. So there is a possibility of a conflict with graduation. We in the conference try to do our best to avoid conflicts when possible, specifically for postseason events or regular season events that we can control. But there is a possibility. I can't give you a good answer, but just to know that historically, there's usually conflicts, and there's a possibility that there would be a conflict again this year.
This is an interesting question. The UF website indicates that all food in Henderson will be served by staff. Will those be pre-measured portions, and will athletes be able to get enough food with one swipe, or will they have to end up swiping multiple times?
You'll have enough food. They're not pre-measured. They're served by someone standing behind the counter, and we will make enough food available to you, as we do as if you were serving yourself. You may have to go back through the line again, but you would not have to pay again during one visit to the dining hall.
Thank you, Dr. Fell. What is the plan if an athlete tests positive for the virus as far as quarantine and contact tracing?
There is a very detailed positive test protocol outlined in that Start Safe, Stay Safe document for the university. So again, I urge you to look at that. In athletics, we throw in a separate wrench in that you are usually involved in a team activity, which is going to make contact tracing a little bit different. So if we do have a positive test, if we are testing either asymptomatic and a positive test comes back, or a symptomatic positive test, that positive test, student athlete, like any other student, would go into quarantine space on campus. We do have space set aside for quarantine and self-isolation. And then the first call we make is to the Cosiana Health Center, and then are in contact with the health department. And they lead us through that process. There's a very specific process that the health department goes through for contact tracing. And so that may mean that while we're contact tracing, that maybe a sport is shut down for a couple of days till we can do a thorough contact tracing, see who needs to be self-isolated based on close contact as defined by the CDC. And then we'll be able to reopen up activity once we're cleared with those who are not deemed as in close contact, but who need to self-isolate. So it is a very prescriptive process, but it is also very dependent on the situation. So if we have a positive test in a low contact sport, where contact with their teammates maybe in close quarters hasn't happened, we may not have to pause a sport. But if we do have a positive test in a high contact sport, there's a good possibility we will at least need to pause that sport for contact tracing to happen. And if it is deemed safe, we would allow the sport to resume, or it may be on pause for 2 weeks, 14 days, as the team is in self-isolation. So it will be very dependent on the situation, but that is clearly outlined, and we will work closely with our health officials to make sure that all of those procedures are in place. Athletic staff, minus the athletic trainers, are not qualified to make any health decisions in any time, and specifically with contact tracing and positive tests. So we will turn that over to those that are qualified to lead us through that process.
We have a parent of an athlete that competes in the winter, and she is wondering, have any decisions been made about parents being able to attend sporting events?
We will again follow state and local guidelines on that. Currently in Ohio, there is no fans at contact sports, and I believe they are reevaluating that at the end of the month. So if fans aren't allowed at a contact sport, we would obviously follow those. We're also going to look specifically at our facilities and if we can host fans and parents safely. It is our goal that if fans are not permitted in any of our facilities, and that may be dependent on inside, outside, if we do have that discretion, that we are making our best faith effort to be able to stream competitive athletic events. And so working with UFTV and the great staff they have there to be able to provide more streaming options, so that if parents and fans are not allowed at a competitive event, that they will be able to see that electronically.
Here's a good general question, Brandi. Which sports are considered high contact?
You know, I should have my list in front of me here. It is different than, I will tell you what the state of Ohio defines contact sports in the NCAA. We will send out a full list of what they define. I can tell you offhand, football, volleyball, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's basketball are all in the high category. The medium and low are wrestling is also in the high category. And then everyone else, I think, believe falls in medium and low, but we'll get that information specifically on which sports come out. If you don't want to wait for me to send it to you, you can Google, the NCAA has it clearly lined out, but we'll send that out to you.
A student athlete has a sports scholarship that involves participation in competitions. Will this scholarship be valid if classes are online?
We are committed to your educational experience far more than your athletic experience here at the University of Findlay. We think it's a great marriage and it really completes your experience. But if classes were to go fully online, we will honor and continue your athletic scholarship because you have not done something that would be deemed that you've chosen to not participate in athletics. So please don't worry if we do go to a completely remote setting, that your athletic scholarship will be intact.
When it comes to testing for COVID, are we required to pay for our own testing or does that go through the university?
So any COVID related expense as deemed by the NCAA cannot be at the cost of the student athlete. There are some federal programs right now in place that your primary insurance should cover any COVID related expense through the Family First Act. But if not, that is something that we will work together with you on, but we will work to make sure that those expenses do not get charged directly to you. But we will go the route that your primary insurance should cover most COVID related expenses, but we'll definitely work through each case individually and depending on the situation.
And is the flu vaccine required or suggested?
So you're referring to what we put in place for our Oiler Pledge, what we were asking for you as student athletes to do. You will see there's an updated version. Our team physician and the health professionals here said we should require it. And we have taken a step back on that. You will see now that Oiler Pledge has highly recommended. We do recommend you get the flu vaccine. It is what we are being told by the health professionals can really help, but we are not requiring it for you to get that vaccine as a student athlete or on campus. So we recommend it. The health professionals would tell us that it's the best thing to do, but it is not required for participation in athletics or to be on campus.
Are Gators okay for masks or do students need more traditional type masks?
Any type of face covering is okay. For athletics in particular, we have purchased for all student athletes a Gator type mask so that you can move it up and down and take it on and off coming in and out of activity. So you will get that in your team meeting, a Gator type mask, but you may wear any type of mask. As you see now, Dr. Fell and I each have a traditional type mask on, and that is absolutely acceptable depending on your preference.
That's all the questions we have right now.
There must be more parents on here because let me tell you, your children are never this quiet when they are here. Well, if there are no more questions, please know we're here to answer questions and know that we are definitely putting the safety of our student athletes above and beyond any other decision that we make this year. So if there's a question, a concern, something that doesn't make sense, I can't tell you that I'll have an exact answer as we move through and things change, but we will do our best to provide you the answer that we have and let you know the rationale behind the decision that we're making. So please have your student athletes talk to your coaches. And if you can't get an answer that you need, please feel free to directly contact anybody in the administrative staff to be able to provide you that information. We're excited to have you back on campus. We're excited to provide you with a different, but a great athletic experience. So we'll come back, be excited, know that we're here for you, and that we're going to do all we can to provide you the best experience. And I think that's it. This recording, this will be shared. And if you've got other questions, please don't hesitate to ask.